Imagine working somewhere for years, watching the stock climb to $90 a share, dumping your entire retirement into it, and then watching every dollar of it vanish in a matter of weeks. That is not a hypothetical. That happened to thousands of real people at a company called Enron, which in the year 2000 was celebrated as one of the smartest businesses on the planet. Today, let me show you exactly how it fell apart. So first, what even was Enron? It started in 1985 as a fairly boring business, a merger of two natural gas pipeline companies, Houston Natural Gas and Internorth. Pipelines, contracts, energy. Not exactly thrilling stuff. But under its chairman Kenneth and later its rising star executive Jeffrey Skilling, Enron reinvented itself. It stopped thinking of itself as a company that moved gas through pipes and started acting like a Wall Street trading desk for energy. Instead of just delivering energy, Enron created markets to buy and sell contracts on it. Bets on the future price of gas, electricity, even bandwidth. It became a middleman in a giant financial casino it helped build. Here's a question to sit with for a second. How do you value a business like that? A pipeline you can touch, but a promise to trade energy 20 years from now? That question is where this whole story goes sideways. For a while, everybody loved this new Enron. The stock soared. The revenue numbers looked enormous. Executives were treated like visionaries who had figured out the future of the entire energy industry before anyone else. Fortune magazine named Enron America's most innovative company 6 years running, from 1996 through 2001. Business schools taught it as a case study in reinvention. Analysts practically begged people to buy the stock. At its peak in 2000, Enron reported revenues of around $100 billion and was one of the largest companies in the United States by that measure. On paper, it looked untouchable. And here's the uncomfortable part. The word innovative was doing a lot of heavy lifting. Because a big chunk of Enron's genius wasn't in energy. It was in accounting. And that is a very different kind of clever. Let me introduce the first big trick, because you need to understand it. It's called mark-to-market accounting. Sounds sleepy, I know, but stay with me, because this is where the imaginary money starts flowing. Normally, a company records revenue when it actually earns it. You deliver the product, cash comes in. You book it. Simple and grounded in reality. That's the traditional way most businesses keep score. Mark-to-market flips that. It lets you book the estimated future profit of a long-term deal today, the moment you sign it, based on what you think it will be worth over its entire life. The Securities and Exchange Commission approved Enron's use of it back in 1992. So say Enron signs a 20-year energy contract. It could estimate all the profit it hoped to make across those 2 decades and report a huge chunk of it as income right now, before a single dollar had actually arrived. Do you see the problem? The profit is a guess. And when your profit is a guess, and your bonus depends on that profit, you are very, very tempted to guess generously. Optimism becomes a business strategy. Now here's the trap that guarantee builds. Once you've booked the imaginary future profit today, next year you have to show growth on top of it. So you need bigger deals, bigger estimates, bigger fantasies, just to stand still. But inflated profits create a second problem, and it's a sneaky one. All this aggressive trading and all these ambitious projects meant Enron was taking on enormous amounts of debt. And debt looks bad on a balance sheet. If investors saw how much Enron actually owed, the stock would fall and its credit rating would drop. And a lower credit rating would make everything more expensive, a death spiral for a company that lived on borrowed money. So enter trick number 2, special purpose entities. These are separate little companies you can legally set up for specific, legitimate business reasons, isolating a project or a risk. Used honestly, they're a normal financing tool. Used dishonestly, they become a place to hide your garbage. Enron created a web of these entities and quietly shoved its debts and its failing investments into them, off the main balance sheet where investors could see. Picture it like this. It's like moving all the junk you can't afford into a storage unit in your friend's name, then telling everyone your house is spotless. Technically, the junk isn't in your house, but it's still yours. The architect of a lot of this financial engineering was Enron's chief financial officer, Andrew Fastow. His job was, in theory, to safeguard the company's finances. Instead, he built the machinery that hit its rot. Fastow set up partnerships with names like LJM and Chuco. On paper, they were independent entities that Enron could do deals with. In reality, Fastow was running them, and in some cases personally profiting from both sides. So Enron would sell a troubled asset or a big debt to one of these partnerships, book a gain, and make its books look healthy. But the partnerships were often propped up by Enron's own stock. It was, essentially, doing deals with itself. Let that land for a second. The company was reporting profits by trading with entities it secretly controlled, backed by its own shares. As long as the stock kept rising, the illusion held. The moment it fell, the whole thing was rigged to collapse. And Fastow didn't just hide debt, he skimmed. Investigators later established that he pulled tens of millions of dollars out of these partnerships for himself and associates, while presenting them to Enron's board as being in the company's interest. Now you might be thinking, where were the auditors? Isn't there supposed to be a firm whose entire job is to check the books and tell the public the truth? Yes, there absolutely is. And that brings us to Arthur Andersen. Arthur Andersen was one of the so-called Big Five accounting firms, a giant, respected name in auditing. They were the ones signing off on Enron's financial statements, telling the world these numbers could be trusted. But here's the conflict baked in. Andersen wasn't just auditing Enron. It was also earning huge fees for consulting work for Enron. So the watchdog was also a well-paid business partner. Guess how hard the watchdog barked? And when things started to unravel, Andersen employees shredded a significant volume of Enron-related documents. That shredding led to a criminal conviction for obstruction of justice, a conviction the Supreme Court actually overturned in 2005 on jury instruction grounds. But the reversal came too late to matter. The reputational damage was fatal. Arthur Andersen, a firm with tens of thousands of employees worldwide, effectively collapsed. So the fraud didn't just kill Enron. It killed its accountant too. So how did the illusion finally break? Well, in August 2001, Jeffrey Skilling, who had become chief executive only months earlier, abruptly resigned, citing personal reasons. When a CEO leaves a soaring company that fast, people get nervous. Around the same time, an Enron executive named Sharon Watkins wrote a now-famous internal memo to Kenneth. She warned, in essence, that the company was at risk of imploding under the weight of its own accounting practices. Think about how brave that is. Everyone around you is celebrating, the stock is high, and you're the one raising your hand to say the numbers don't add up. Whistleblowers are often the only honest voice in a very loud room. Then, in October 2001, Enron reported a massive quarterly loss and took a huge write-down. Soon after, it admitted it had overstated its earnings for years and would have to restate its financials going back to 1997. That restatement was the confession. It effectively wiped out hundreds of millions of dollars of previously reported profit. The Securities and Exchange Commission opened a formal investigation, and suddenly every one of those hidden partnerships was under a microscope. Once investors realized the reported profits weren't real, the trust evaporated. And a trading company runs entirely on trust. Nobody wants to do billion-dollar deals with a partner who might not exist tomorrow. The stock went into free fall. Remember that stock that peaked around $90 a share in 2000? By late November 2001, it was trading for well under $1. The credit rating agencies downgraded Enron's debt to junk status, which cut off its lifeline of borrowing. A rival energy company, Dynegy, briefly explored buying Enron to rescue it, but backed out once it saw the true scale of the mess. With no buyer and no credit, the company had run out of road. On December 2, 2001, Enron filed for bankruptcy. At the time, it was the largest corporate bankruptcy in United States history, with reported assets north of $60 billion. A giant, gone almost overnight. And just to be clear about what I'm doing here, I'm walking you through history and the mechanics of a fraud. This is educational and entertainment content, not personalized financial or legal advice. Always do your own research. Now here's the human cost, because this is the part that should make you angry. Many Enron employees had their 401k retirement savings heavily concentrated in Enron stock. When the stock went to nearly zero, so did their nest eggs. Thousands of workers lost their jobs almost immediately, and many lost the retirement they'd spent decades building. Meanwhile, some executives had sold significant amounts of their own stock earlier, while publicly encouraging others to hold on. There's a brutal lesson buried in there. and it's one worth remembering forever. Never put the bulk of your retirement into the single company that also signs your paycheck. If it fails, you lose your income and your savings on the same day. So what happened to the people at the top? Andrew Fastow, the CFO, pleaded guilty to fraud charges and cooperated with prosecutors. He was sentenced to 6 years in prison. His cooperation helped build the case against his former bosses. Jeffrey Skilling was convicted on multiple counts, including securities fraud, and was originally sentenced to 24 years, later reduced to 14. He ended up serving over a decade in federal prison before his release. Kenneth was also convicted of fraud and conspiracy, but he died of a heart attack in July 2006, before he was ever sentenced. Because of that, a court later vacated his conviction, since he could no longer appeal it. So what did Enron actually reveal? First, that reported profit is an opinion until cash shows up. Mark-to-market wasn't illegal, but it let a company turn hopeful guesses about the future into today's headline earnings. Second, it revealed how debt can be dressed up and shoved into the shadows. Those off-balance sheet entities let Enron look far healthier than it was. If you can't see the whole picture, you can't judge the real risk. Third, it exposed how badly the guardrails failed. Auditors compromised by their own fees, a board that approved the arrangements, and analysts who kept cheering. When everyone getting paid says everything's fine, that is exactly when to be skeptical. The scandal directly triggered a big legal response. In 2002, Congress passed the Sarbanes-Oxley Act, which tightened rules on corporate financial reporting, made executives personally certify their financial statements, and strengthened oversight of the auditors who check them. So for you as a regular investor, what's the takeaway? Be wary of a company whose story is dazzling, but whose numbers are impossible to understand. Complexity can be a sign of genuine sophistication or a very expensive place to hide things. And again, this is history and general education, not advice about your specific portfolio. The point isn't to make you paranoid. It's to make you curious enough to ask how a company actually makes its money before you trust it with yours. Enron is now taught as the textbook example of accounting fraud, a company that was praised as the future right up until the moment it turned out to be built on illusions. Innovation with no honesty underneath is just a countdown timer. If this breakdown helped the pieces click into place, do me a favor and subscribe, because next I want to walk you through how ordinary people can actually read a balance sheet and spot these red flags themselves. Drop a comment with the scandal you want covered next, and I'll see you in the following one.